Before performing any security test, penetration test, or vulnerability analysis, you must set up a dedicated, isolated, and controlled environment. This is not optional. Working directly on your personal machine, using your real accounts, or testing on live production systems is both dangerous and unethical. This course explains precisely how to build a secure test environment using virtual machines, dedicated accounts, and appropriately configured browsers. Each of these three pillars is essential, and understanding why matters as much as knowing how. Why a dedicated test environment is mandatory. When you run security tools, you generate traffic that can look like an attack. You also manipulate payloads, scripts, and configurations that can accidentally damage a system, expose your real identity, or create legal liability. Imagine running a vulnerability scanner on your work laptop connected to your company network. You could trigger alerts, accidentally affect neighboring systems, or even violate terms of service. A dedicated environment acts as a controlled sandbox. Everything that happens inside it stays inside it. This principle of isolation is fundamental in cybersecurity and mirrors what you already encountered in the DevSecOps pipeline content. Security must be embedded at every stage, and the test stage is no exception. Virtual machines, the foundation of your test lab. A virtual machine is a software-based emulation of a physical computer. It runs its own operating system, has its own simulated hardware, and behaves like an independent machine, even though it is hosted on your physical computer. The software that manages virtual machines is called a hypervisor. The two most common free hypervisors for personal use are VirtualBox, made by Oracle, and VMware Workstation Player, made by VMware. Both allow you to create, configure, and destroy virtual machines as needed. Why use a virtual machine for security testing? Isolation. The virtual machine is separated from your host system. If you accidentally install malware or break a configuration, your real machine is unaffected. Snapshots. Most hypervisors allow you to take a snapshot, which is a saved state of the virtual machine at a specific moment. If something goes wrong, you restore the snapshot in seconds. This is invaluable when testing exploits or destructive payloads. Reproducibility. You can share a virtual machine image with a colleague or recreate the same environment from scratch at any time. Safe experimentation. You can break things intentionally, which is exactly what penetration testing requires. The most widely used operating system for security testing is Kali Linux. It is a Debian-based Linux distribution maintained by Offensive Security and comes pre-installed with hundreds of security tools including Nmap, Wireshark, Metasploit, Burp Suite, and many others. You will use these tools extensively throughout this course. Kali Linux is available as a virtual machine image that you can directly import into VirtualBox or VMware, which saves significant setup time. For practicing attacks against intentionally vulnerable targets, dedicated systems exist. Metasploitable is a deliberately insecure Linux virtual machine designed to be attacked. DVWA, Damn Vulnerable Web Application, is a web application full of known vulnerabilities that you can deploy locally to practice. A WASP WebGoat is another intentionally vulnerable web application maintained by the Open Web Application Security Project. These targets are designed for training and allow you to practice legally and safely without risking real systems. A typical beginner lab setup looks like this. You run Kali Linux in one virtual machine as your attacker machine, and you run Metasploitable or a DVWA instance in a second virtual machine as your target. Both virtual machines are placed on an isolated virtual network, called a host-only network or internal network in VirtualBox terminology. This means the two virtual machines can communicate with each other, but neither has access to the internet or your real local network. This is the safest configuration for a beginner. Critical network configuration rules. Network configuration inside your hypervisor is one of the most important security decisions in your lab setup. There are three common network modes. Bridged mode. The virtual machine appears as a separate device on your physical network, with its own IP address visible to the rest of the network. This is dangerous for attack labs because your traffic can reach real systems. Network address translation mode, often called NAT. The virtual machine shares your host machine's internet connection but is hidden behind it. The virtual machine can reach the internet, but other machines on your network cannot reach it directly. This is acceptable for downloading tools but not ideal for isolated labs. Host-only or internal network mode. The virtual machine can only communicate with other virtual machines in the same group or with your host machine. There is no internet access and no access to your real local network. This is the recommended mode for attack and defense labs. Always verify your network settings before starting any test session. A misconfigured network mode can send your test traffic to real machines without you realizing it. Dedicated accounts, keeping your real identity separate. Beyond the virtual machine itself, you need dedicated accounts for your security work. This means creating separate email addresses, usernames, and platform accounts that are entirely distinct from your personal or professional identity. Why does this matter? Many security platforms, bug bounty programs, and training environments require you to register. When you register with your personal email or your professional work email, you link your real identity to activities that might involve vulnerability discovery, exploitation practice, or security research. Even when everything is legal and authorized, mixing identities creates confusion and potential risk. For example, if you sign up for a bug bounty platform like HackerOne or BugCrowd, create a dedicated account with a pseudonym and a dedicated email address. Do the same for platforms like HackTheBox or TryHackMe, which are legal online environments for practicing penetration testing skills. Use a dedicated email provider such as ProtonMail for these accounts to add an extra layer of separation. On your virtual machine, create a non-root user account for day-to-day work. The root account on Linux has unrestricted access to everything. Running all your work as root increases the risk of accidental damage and is considered poor practice. Use root privileges only when specifically required by a tool or task. Also, never reuse passwords between your security research accounts and your personal accounts. Use a password manager to generate and store strong, unique passwords for each account. This habit protects you from credential theft and also demonstrates the kind of security discipline expected of a cybersecurity professional. Browser configuration for security testing. Your web browser is one of your primary tools for web application testing, and it needs to be configured carefully. The key principle is to use a dedicated browser profile or a dedicated browser entirely for security work, separate from the browser you use for personal browsing. The recommended browser for security testing is Mozilla Firefox. It is highly customizable, supports essential security testing extensions, and is widely used in the professional security community. You can also use Chromium-based browsers, but Firefox is generally preferred for web application penetration testing. Here are the key configurations and extensions you need. Foxy Proxy. This extension allows you to easily switch between different proxy configurations. During web application testing, you will route your browser traffic through an intercepting proxy tool such as Burp Suite. Foxy Proxy lets you toggle this proxy on and off with one click, which is far faster and safer than manually changing network settings each time. Cookie Editor or Cookie Manager Plus. These extensions let you view, edit, add, and delete cookies directly in the browser. This is essential for session management testing, where you need to inspect or manipulate session tokens. Wapalizer. This extension identifies the technologies used by a web application, such as the web framework, programming language, server software, and content management system. Knowing that a site runs on WordPress 5.8 or uses a specific version of jQuery helps you focus your testing on known vulnerabilities for those technologies. User Agent Switcher. This lets you change the browser identifier string sent to web servers. Some applications behave differently depending on the browser or device making the request, and this tool helps you explore those variations. You should also disable or carefully manage browser features that could interfere with your testing or expose information. For example, disable form autofill in your testing browser to prevent accidental credential leaks. Make sure that your testing browser does not have access to saved personal passwords. When using an intercepting proxy such as Burp Suite, you will need to install the proxy certificate into your browser. Burp Suite acts as a middleman between your browser and the target web application, decrypting encrypted traffic so you can inspect and modify it. Without installing the certificate, your browser will show security warnings and block the connection. The process involves starting Burp Suite, configuring Firefox to route traffic through it on a local port, typically port 8080, then visiting a special Burp Suite address in the browser to download and install the certificate. Practical summary of your environment setup. To be fully ready for the upcoming practical exercises in this course, your secure test environment should include a hypervisor installed on your physical machine. VirtualBox is free and sufficient for beginners. A Kali Linux virtual machine configured as your attacker platform. At least one intentionally vulnerable target virtual machine, Metasploitable, a DVWA instance, or similar, both virtual machines placed on a host-only or internal network, with no access to the real internet or your local network, a dedicated email address, and dedicated platform accounts for security training. HackerOne, HackTheBox, TryHackMe, etc. A dedicated Firefox browser profile configured with Foxy Proxy, Cookie Editor, and Wapalizer. Burp Suite installed and configured on your Kali Linux virtual machine, with the Burp certificate installed in your testing browser. The habit of taking snapshots before any significant test or change inside your virtual machines. This environment is your professional workspace. Treat it seriously. The discipline you apply to setting it up correctly reflects the discipline you will need when working on real projects and real clients. A poorly configured test environment leads to accidents, legal issues, and unreliable results. A well-configured one gives you the freedom to test aggressively, learn from failures, and build genuine expertise safely. As you progress through this course and begin running actual tools and attacks, every activity will assume that you are working inside this isolated environment. Never perform security tests outside your controlled lab unless you have explicit written authorization from the owner of the target system. This rule is absolute and non-negotiable in the cybersecurity profession.